Okay, are we ready to begin? All right. Welcome, everybody. I want to welcome you to the Napa Valley Grapegrowers 2023 Harvest Press Conference. And we had it set this year to actually be done with harvest before the press conference, which is pushed us into November this year. But I'm really excited about the panel we have with us today, and I'm really excited that you all are joining us as well to kind of want to understand more about the 2023 harvest and hopefully learn more about it and ask questions on any details that you would like to have further sort of work on. The 2023 is probably one of the mildest on record, which is means a lot for the wine growing and the winemaking, and that'll be discussed today. And, you know, it's exciting to hear winemakers already talking about this vintage. And normally we don't hear winemakers wanting to sort of profess anything, but having a cool, long growing season like this has kind of led to some real excitement for us after a few years of drought and all. So I'm going to start in with a little bit of housekeeping as well. We will be accepting questions in the chat panel there, in the chat box, and going through your questions to direct them to the panel. If there's anybody in particular you want to ask a question to, please insert their name as well, or if it's a general question, we'll put it out to the panel. And so any questions on that? If we don't get to your questions today, we will definitely follow up with either someone in the panel or whomever is appropriate to answer your questions. So I hope that helps you as well. So I want to start today by introducing our panel, a panel that has a lot of experience in the Napa Valley growing grapes these years. And we're going to start off first with Daniela Bazán. She is a partner of Bazán Vineyard Management Company. We also have Justin Leigon, who has been working in the Valley as well, and he is a partner at Piña Vineyard Management. And then we have Macy Stubstad from Lawrence Wine Estates, who is the director of viticulture there. So I want to just maybe start out talking about a little bit about the season, but we're going to probably mostly focus on the harvest. But any questions that come up, you can bring up as well. But Danielle, do you want to talk a little bit first before we get into questions about what you do and where you farm and what kind of varieties you farm here in the Valley? And then we'll follow up with the others as well.
Of course, yeah. So I am Daniela Bazán with Bazán Vineyard Management, also with Bazán Cellars, and I'm also on the Napa Valley Farmworker Foundation Education Committee. With our vineyard management company, we do farming all throughout Napa Valley and a little bit over into Sonoma County as well. And for our own wine label Bazán Cellars, our vineyards are mostly in Napa and the Coombsville area. But again, we do farming all throughout the Valley.
And Justin?
Yeah, I'm Justin Leigon, Piña Vineyard Management, and I'm also on the board of directors with Napa Grapegrowers. We farm roughly about 1,000 acres across the Valley, a tiny little bit in Sonoma County and a tiny little bit in Solano County, but mostly in Napa. We do everything from Carnero Chardonnay to Mountain Cabernet Sauvignon and in between. So we cover a lot of ground and get to work with a lot of fantastic winemakers and see different parts of the Valley.
Macy?
Hi, I'm Macy Stubstad. I work for Lawrence Wine Estates. We have about 630 acres in Napa Valley, from Coombsville up to Calistoga and Spring Mountain over to Howell Mountain. The wineries that we own are Heights Cellars, Stony Hill, Burgess Cellars, Inkgrade, Haynes, and Brendel. So get to work with hands-on with the winemakers and outsource all of our farming to external companies.
And one of my, excuse me, I think the thing that is on a lot of people's mind is this cooler, longer year after 3 years of drought, how that is to farm and to work with wineries and on. And maybe, Macy, you could start with what effects this cooler or longer year had in your farming and grape growing.
Yeah, so this spring we had bud break about 2 weeks behind 2022, and coming into the season, my vineyards, we ranged from 40 to 55 inches of rain, which was such a gift after the last few years of drought, where we had somewhere between 9 to 20 inches in 2021 and 2022. So entering the season with full soil profiles really helped with early canopy development. And it kind of allowed us to do things like, reduce irrigation through the season, have the canopy we needed to ripen fruit through harvest. So it was just such a gift of a vintage to be able to enter it with such great rain.
And Justin, did you see differences in bloom or in farming for you as well, getting into harvest or preparing for harvest?
Yeah, it was very similar. The bloom period was interesting because not only did it kind of start later, but it was extended as well, depending on which part of the valley we were farming because of the cooler, mild kind of spring, summer weather. So we knew at around bloom time, let's say normally in a vintage, it would be in the middle of May, we were seeing it in the first part of June. So that gave us a good heads up that harvest was going to be a few weeks later when we kicked off. And so that was about what we saw. Normally we might start with Sauvignon Blanc in the middle of August, and this year it was around the last couple of days of August. So it kind of tracked from bloom all the way throughout.
And for you, Daniela, how was it with growing this year into harvest, with working with wineries and all too?
And similar to Macy and Justin as well, everything was a little bit delayed this year with bloom, with aeration. And so going into harvest, getting all the harvest preparation, everything ready, we were really starting to gear up in September rather than August this year.
And how are the yields in general? If any of you you can all speak on that, but if anybody wants to jump in on the yields from different areas of the valley to different varieties of the valley as well.
Yeah, a big treat was this year, everything was every shoot was pushing like 2 clusters, maybe even 3 in some cases. And what Justin was saying, even with the later bloom, while it was long and cooler, we didn't really see as much, shatter as we have in typical like cooler bloom periods. So, I mean, overall yields were definitely up from the last few. It seemed like a very healthy crop. And we had the canopy really to support ripening that crop that was on there. So it was a nice luxury.
Yeah, we saw similar things as well. I would say 15 to 20% above kind of average, just to throw out a real generalized number. And what was great with the 2023 vintage was the fruit, the integrity of the skins was just so fantastic all the way throughout harvest. And we didn't see that late season dehydration that can be common, especially in warmer years. And so we retained a lot of just the general weight, which was nice. And a lot of the acidity as well. It was really a fantastic vintage.
Yeah, I think especially with the cooler weather and just the overall, the weather really cooperated with us during the harvest season this year, that we didn't get that dehydration in stark contrast to last year in particular. But the yields, compared to the last few years, like Justin was saying, that they were definitely much better than we have been getting in the past few years.
No, and it kind of goes to speaking, there's less heat accumulation this year in general throughout the valley. Something more along the line, like say of a 1998 or 2010 or 11. And I don't know how that was for you all in dealing with wineries or with the farming and timing and how that works timing wise, because things did get delayed, or how that work went for you all during sort of the busiest times of year of spring and summer preparing for harvest. How about for you, Daniela?
I think for us, on the farming side, we are, used to being more adaptable to all the different changes and just kind of going with the flow. I know in the wineries, though, some of the picks that we were bringing in, the grapes that we were bringing in, things had to get moved around a little bit just because of the tank space in the wineries. Because the yields were so great and everything too. So for us though, we were really able to just kind of flow with it. And again, the weather really cooperated with us in order to be able to have some very successful harvest picks.
I was comparing my weather data for this year to last year at one of my vineyards, and in one specific vineyard of ours, it's a hillside vineyard, we had only 6 days over 100, and the highest temperature was 103 compared to last year where we had that famous Labor Day heat spike. So I think it's just we had really nice temperate weather, mild weather all of harvest, which allowed for very slow, like even ripening and no crazy bricks accumulation, allowing for a lot of flavor development, skins to soften, anthocyanins to build. There were sometimes where I think we all kind of wish that we almost could have a little more heat. I know I bought a lot of shade cloth after last year and I didn't have to really put it out this year. So, But overall, I mean, I think the moderate, mild temperatures was such a nice thing to have this year, with just slow ripening, and overall from veraison to harvest, I think we added anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks of added time on the vine for them just to really build flavors.
Yeah, definitely. And to add on to that, I think the seasons that we have like this really showcase each vineyard site, and you get to see not only within a sub-AVA, or a region of the valley, but even different blocks within one vineyard really express themselves differently, experience the different ripening curve even. And that's something that I think really showcases that sense of place. And that's what I think this vintage is going to be all about. It's just going to be very terroir driven and showcasing each specific site.
Yeah, because it didn't seem that the rules were always followed in the law of nature of Chardonnay and Merlot, and then Cabernet. I mean, I kept hearing people picking Cabernet and they still had Chardonnay out. I don't know if that was your experience and how that was for wineries and labor as well. I mean, having this harvest drawn out, it every week it was a bit of, oh, next week's going to be the big week, and then there was really no heat to push anybody, so people took advantage of that, and how that affected your scheduling of crews and working with wineries. Daniela?
I think for us, especially on the workforce side, that everybody was just kind of waiting for it to come. This is the season where workers really are able to work a lot and to earn a lot of extra money, and everybody was just waiting and waiting, and we knew it was all going to come together all at once, where we were going to be picking for all of our clients all at the same time. Everybody was going to be wanting to get that fruit in around the same time. But again, then as the weather progressed and plans changed, and so kind of moving things around. But even with that rescheduling and everything, that we were busy for a solid 3-4 weeks, at least, that it was nonstop.
Yeah, definitely. We saw the same thing as well. Typically, I think of the last week of September as being kind of the crunch time, the last week of September, first week of October. And this year, we didn't really get going at that pace until about October 7th or 8th. But then once we started, it was full on. We just finished Monday of this week, so November 13th, and it was every day was fully booked, overbooked. Most crews were having to pick at multiple locations, and it was just full steam ahead all the way to the end.
Yeah, it was about the same for us. It was about almost half of our total tonnage came in after my last day of picking in 2022. So October for us was really busy in the winery, and all of our wineries. And it was a game of logistics for winemakers to kind of bring all this fruit in a 3 to 4 week window in some cases for Cabernet, and how to kind of work with tank capacities. And not having to press off things earlier than they wanted to make room for the next fruit. But the nice thing was we didn't have these, wild high temperatures moving things along at such a fast rate that things had to be pressured to come in before they were ready.
And how did, being a wet year that we had, we all talk about irrigation and water availability, whether it be from wells or collecting in ponds. And we all had an abundance pretty much of water, you could say, this year, but also knowing that we need to hold on to whatever we can. I mean, everybody's very conscious about water conservation and all. And so how did irrigation and the water soil profiles play into your irrigation strategies this year, Macy?
So what I was seeing was also during the spring, we had, our soils, we started out completely fully saturated, and it was almost until about into early June, my canopies looked as if they were only about 50% of where I wanted them to be. And it was just because we had this late fog every morning that kind of moved down the valley at around almost noon or 1 o'clock, where it typically kind of starts moving back down around 10 a.m. And it was until in June, we started finally getting this nice heat and sun, and then canopies started to fully develop in about a 2-week period into June. So that was kind of, I think, what's something overall that we saw. There wasn't, too much, there wasn't a lot of heat. So there was nice soil moisture there throughout the season. Looking at soil moisture probes, we, never really saw this urgent need to have to give to give vines water throughout, except maybe on our hillsides where, our rockier soils drained a lot faster. But yeah, it was really nice for irrigation and being able to take blocks to almost 0 to maybe 1 irrigation this season overall.
Nice. What about you, Daniela?
I think for us as well that we had really good soil profiles, soil moisture profiles going in, and in some cases irrigation was delayed to be able to allow the vines to really do what they need to do to stress them a little bit, but without going too much. And so just being able to play around with that a little bit more this year to get the quality that we wanted, as opposed to really having to hurry up and make sure everything is fully irrigated because of the weather, in particular the heat spikes.
And Justin?
Yeah, and one of the aspects I really enjoy about a season like this is that it gives you more flexibility with your canopy management. And when we're going into the suckering period or lateral removal period, we can really be thoughtful about how we want to manage the canopy for the season, as opposed to a year where we're in drought and we're just trying to get a canopy, to ripen the fruit. I think that was a really nice aspect, and it was very healthy across the valley. You could drive up and down the trail or the highway and look out and see really nice, healthy colored canopies, which was really great to see.
To your point, Justin, I was kind of reflecting back on canopy management this summer. And I think it's really easy sometimes to think about like last year when we're in this year. And, when we have these, heat waves during harvest, it's almost like during the summer when we get in and start leafing, we almost are wanting to be a little careful because the last Labor Day, we had this major heat wave. So I remember this year almost being a little more cautious on my leafing, just trying to, once you take a leaf off, it doesn't come back. So it's like making sure everything has nice protection for the whole season. And when we just had this continuous mild temperatures, all of ripening, we had to kind of go back in also and kind of take a little more leaves here and there just to get some sun on the fruit a little later too.
Yeah, it's because I think it's hard for you all. You've got 3 years in your rearview mirror of drought and some warm seasons, and how that affects going into this season. You obviously have to wear a cautionary hat a bit to kind of for the unexpected, but yet you do have to focus on this vintage as well. So that's a hard line to kind of like follow as well, I'm sure.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as the leafing though too, we wanted to get in there and to have that good airflow though too, to help the grapes along. And then as we were waiting for harvest to really pick up, that was some of the work that the crews were actually able to do to get in and take off more leaves. So that way the grapes had a little bit more exposure to move those sugars along, and to also facilitate to have cleaner picks than when we did get in.
Nice. I'm going to open up, if anybody wants to bring up any questions in the webinar chat, please feel free to do so. We'll keep talking though, but if you have any questions, please type them in, and we'll be looking at addressing those with the panelists as well. Were there any labor issues this year, in the sense that, that always comes up every year about how to manage labor during harvest due to the uncertainty of it, and how that worked with you all this year as well, given that it was a drawn out harvest?
I think we managed it pretty well. I think we're always just sort of perennially in a shortage. We always wish we had a couple more crews or a couple more field workers. But not having the crisis mode where you get the call from a winemaker or a winery that says, okay, bring in the whole ranch, start at one side and pick all the blocks. This year it was one of those seasons where you could really bring in the blocks as they were ready, as Macy was saying. And that allows us, I think, logistically to work better with our scheduling, and trucking as well is a big part of it. And it's definitely a partnership with the wineries. It's a dance we play, we do every year with the macro bins and their availability and when we can pick them up and all of the logistics that go around all of that. So I think it does take a lot of teamwork across the whole valley on both winery and grower side to make it work. And this year it felt really good. It felt like we were very successful.
Yeah, kind of speaking to that point, it is a really big production to make these harvest picks happen, to get the fruit into the winery. There's a lot going on behind the scenes. There's work being done 24/7 to make these harvest picks happen, and to get the quality grapes that we really want into the wineries. And I think on the workforce side, again, the workers were really waiting and ready for the harvest to really get underway as it did in October. And so I think just that anticipation, but also having to be a little bit more patient this year definitely came into play.
It's interesting, excuse me, it's interesting, talking grape growers and winemaking, and all three of you, in your companies do both. I mean, you have grapes, but you also make wine as well. And we see that reflected in our membership now across the board, that there's less of that, the growers sitting over here and the winery sitting over there on the other side, and there's not a common ground. I mean, maybe speak to that a bit, how that's changed for you over the years of the winemakers' involvement in your grape growing throughout the season. Macy?
Yeah, talking with some of my winemakers and their overall opinions of the fruit so far, I've tasted, with them during fermentation, and it'll be interesting to see how the wines are, in a couple months from now. But overall, we're seeing like really nice acids, and Justin was talking about this a little earlier, but just the extractability in the skins this season. There's just beautiful color across our cabs. And then it'll just be interesting to see just kind of how flavors just continue just to develop and mature over time. And then I just really have enjoyed the minerality and just the textures of the wines of the wines so far this year.
And the winemakers are out throughout the year with you, looking at things and kind of helping you guys, collaborating on these things, the decisions
we'll meet up. I mean, we start our meetings for pruning and kind of meet on a weekly to bi-weekly basis to go over everything from leafing criterias to fruit thinning that we want to do, depending on the block or the wine that fruit is supposed to go into. And then of course, during harvest, it's regularly out there walking, tasting.
Justin?
Definitely a similar situation. And I think it's, as Macy pointed out, the pruning is so important. And I think that's a big part of how the rest of the season is going to unfold, and what your target yields are, and how you're going to manage from suckering to canopy work. So I like to have an open dialogue throughout the whole season, and have a multi-year perspective on things that we're doing now might not really manifest until next year or the following year. And so it's definitely a more ongoing conversation, rather than, like you said, you're kind of on one side and they're on the other side, and they just, the winemaker may show up when it's time to pick. And to be more successful and achieve the targets, I think it has to be a dialogue throughout the whole season, definitely.
And Daniela?
I'd like to echo the same thing as well. It really is all about collaboration and maintaining those good relationships with the winemakers. And, for all of our different clients that are making their own wine or selling the grapes, we're working with a lot of different people. It is a really tight-knit community for as many wineries as there are out there, that we're all in it together. And so maintaining that dialogue and that close relationship throughout the growing season, I think, is really important. And again, focusing on the goals for the next growing season as well comes into play.
So, every year, there's never a normal year, although every once in a while you have a year that feels classic or normal, but every year there's the takeaway, depending on what is dealt at the hand of grape growing or the year or whatever it be. And you guys have all got quite a few harvests under your belt now. And this is a pretty, I would say, classic Napa in the sense of cool and long, but it made people nervous this year. It was a little more extreme, but just because we've been 3 years behind us of drought. And so what was sort of the lesson or takeaway for you, whether throughout the year, whatever that was, that like kind of adds to your quiver of information as you go forward? How about for you, Justin?
Well, I think you mentioned this before, Mary, about not following the rules of nature or the laws of nature this year. And I think that was really the big takeaway for me, was that each site is going to experience the vintage differently, you know, and not to forget that, and to really pay close attention to different blocks and different sites, and not get comfortable with the idea that, oh, okay, well, all these vineyards are over in, you know, Rutherford, and they're a Cabernet, and so they're all going to have this similar ripening curve, and you're going to kind of view them as just a group that's all going to perform the same way in terms of how the ripening curve is going to go. I think this year really showcased that difference that you see between sites and within vineyards in those blocks, and to always, you know, keep in the forefront of my mind that you need to really pay attention to that, and that way you can perform, you know, the tasks that need to be done when they need to be done, and predict how things are going to ripen throughout the season.
Daniela?
I think for me, the takeaway kind of goes back to patience. You know, this year was really about, you know, kind of waiting out the weather and working with what we were given, and the weather really cooperated with us this year. But I think for us as growers, as farmers, you know, just kind of going back to it, and you know, that the crop is going to allow us to do what we need to do, but also just kind of you know, allow it to do its thing though too. And I think another thing for me though too, maybe on a more personal note, but just kind of feeling more grateful, and really trying to make an effort to reflect and to be grateful for another a good vintage, a good safe harvest this year as well. And you know, for me, because I'm working with family though as well, it you know, really hits home. And this year was my father's 50th harvest here in the valley,
Wow.
our 18th vintage as well. And so for me, and again, because of working with family, you know, that generation with all that knowledge and experience, looking to them, but also looking at how we can inspire and continue that legacy in the younger generations as well. And so in doing work like with the Farmworker Foundation, where we're really building up the professional development for current farm workers with programs like Vineyard, but also focusing on the younger generations as well with the Fields of Opportunity mentorship. I think really putting more effort into these programs is really just going to be the most beneficial for us as an industry.
It definitely feels like there's payoff from all the work that's building every year after year. It's really wonderful to see between the two organizations and what they're providing for support for farm workers and grape growers as well. Yeah, it's great. And Macy?
Danielle, that's so hard to follow.
What she said.
Yeah, what she said, you know. But yeah, so for me, I mean, you know, Justin and Danielle have been with their organizations for you know, many years, and I've been with Lawrence for 3. And so it was something that was very interesting this year was I've worked really with our vineyards in 2 drought years. So seeing them this year, it was like almost seeing all these vineyards for the first time in a different way, because you know, we had, you know, the water we needed going into the season, especially on our hillside vineyards where we might have water, you know, supply issues. You know, in the past couple of years, we actually started off the season in such a great spot. And then I think overall, like one takeaway is really just the communication and logistics between, you know, my winemakers and the farming companies. There was a lot that needed to get done in short windows. Everything from leafing, you know, in our Chardonnay vineyards early on, and that was to bringing in, you know, a larger crop during harvest. So it was really nice, and a good takeaway for me was really just kind of working on, you know, the logistics through all the operations this season.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Okay, we have a few questions that I'm going to throw out, and just if it's appropriate for you to answer, jump on in. The first question is, did you find that cooler regions such as Coombsville, you needed to thin more fruit than what was required in order to ripen the fruit? So that could be Carneros, you know, Coombsville, anything like that, or if you heard anything.
I don't know about necessarily thinning more fruit, but definitely being intentional in the thinning and the dropping the crop as we went along, and really focusing on the clusters that were going to be of the good quality that we wanted to get into the wineries.
Okay, a next question, and maybe all of you can answer this, but what are the winemakers' comments on the season from their perspective? I know you all deal with some different winemakers.
so far, all really positive feedback from them, and the wines what fruit that we've grown and fruit that we've also purchased from outside buyers. It all is very positive. Loving the quality, having that nice acidity. Yields were good. Yields were great coming after the last 2 years. So it's all been very positive feedback from them.
Yeah, same. And I've heard a lot of great things about the color, which is, you know, it can be indicative of future potential quality. So it's been very positive.
Great. Okay, and I've got two questions that I can kind of combine together. Based on all the moisture we received this last year, what do you anticipate for the 2024 vintage? And it kind of ties in with another question. How are you thinking about planning for 2024? I'd like you all to actually address that one. Those are two good questions.
Just finished 2023 on Monday.
No rest.
No rest. So I'll start. I think when thinking about cluster counts and reproduction on a vine, it's a 2-year cycle. And so there's definitely going to be an impact from the season and the moisture that we experienced during the bloom, and the May, June, July period should potentially lead to higher cluster counts next year. I think that's something that's been shown in the literature and is pretty well proven. But, you know, when it comes to water availability in the soil, we just have to see what Mother Nature brings each year. So that's something that we'll see. But I think it should be a good sign for potential yields to be good.
Yeah,
I think there's I was going to say, I think there's talk of, you know, being an El Nino year, but again, it really does depend on the water that we're going to be getting in terms of what we're going to be looking at for next year.
Yeah, I would second those. I mean, I've kind of been trying to prepare our winery side that I do think yields are going to be similar to what this season was. And then, yeah, with El Nino, it's our cover cropping program and talking about cultivation in the spring, which we'll see how much rain we get and the timing of that. But yeah.
No, I find vineyard managers are a pretty adaptable group. You have to be, because Mother Nature has the last laugh and the final say on all these things as well. So I don't think we have any other questions. I'm just looking at right here. Sorry, but any other comments anybody has? If wants to add, if not, we can kind of button up for today. And want to thank you all, the panelists, for joining us today and spreading your information and your wisdom of the year and the growing season, and helping kind of paint the picture of what the season was like for everybody. And I really appreciate the Napa Valley Grape Growers for hosting an event like this to get this information out. And all of you that have attended today, I think it's wonderful that you're interested, and we really appreciate you wanting to care about, because we care greatly about this valley and the grape growing and our farm workers, and we just appreciate that your interest as well. And if you have any further questions after this, feel free to email in. We'd be happy to get back to you if there are any other questions that kind of arise from this discussion as well. So thank you all for joining today, and look forward to seeing you all soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.